What was your finest moment of revenge? I ground up laxatives and tainted all my kitchen fridge food with it to figure out which of my 7 roommates was eating all my food. While I survived off a secret stash in my mini fridge, I found out who did it, very, very quickly. This may seem small, but it was the most satisfying thing I have ever done. When I was in the 7th grade, I sat behind a jerk who hated me and enjoyed being annoying. Every single goddamn day he would lean back in his chair and hit the front of my desk. Over and ever again. If I was trying to write something, he would do it even harder. So one day I decided enough was enough, and in the middle of a lesson he started again. So I waited, and right as he was leaning his chair back fast, trying to knock my desk hard, I pulled it back. Without my desk behind him, his chair tipped right over and he hit the ground hard. I can still clearly remember him whispering "you bitch" beneath the laughter of the whole class and the teacher yelling at him to get up. The look on his face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment and pure rage as he looked up at me from the floor. Bastard never ducked with me. Again. I was expecting you to tape a sharpened pencil to the front of your desk, but well played. Duck his ass. Sodomy is the best revenge. A shitty repair shop in Moab messed up our car, which left us stranded in a nearby national park. We called and demanded they tow the vehicle in, and while they said they did come get us, they never did. When we talked with park rangers, they were quite familiar with the shop, the biggest in town, and with a terrible reputation. We were on our honeymoon, and had more time on our hands than I imagine most travelers do. We went to the shop, demanded a full refund, and when they refused, we sat out front on the curb in our camp chairs for 2 days with homemade protest signs. I was overwhelmed with the support we got from locals, who honked and waved, stopped and chatted with us and shared their own stories of horror. The owner called the cops on us, but the joke was on him. We had already notified the police we had be protesting, and were well within our rights in doing so. In the end, the shop owner refunded all our money, and left visibly distressed when we told him that even with the refund, we were not sure we were ready to leave town. Eventually we did, but not before filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and every review site we could find. They did already been booted from the Chamber of Commerce. We ended up becoming friends with an awesome local mechanic, and having a great story to tell. Justice was served, and without a tinge of guilt. That sounds like a great honeymoon your wife will always remember. Long story short, and kid I was friends with hit me in the balls 3 times in one night. He then called me a wee baby and got in my face. He tried to make me flinch by half swinging at me. I did not flinch, but instead headbutted him with everything I had, crushed his nose, blood pouring out of his face. I had a tiny cut in the center of my forehead, with one line of blood running down my face. I looked ducking psychotic, but badass. Also, duck you for that, David. When I was 11 years old, I was bullied by a 12-year-old boy. He would steal things from my lunch every day. I got sick of it and decided to do something about it. One day, I brought a super hot pepper in my lunch and pretended to be really excited about it. Sure enough, the boy comes over, snatches it from my hand and pops it in his mouth. He practically exploded in pain, writhing around the floor, unable to handle the heat. I calmly looked at him and told him that drinking a nice glass of cold water would help immensely. He did so. This promptly magnified the pain 100x. He never stole food from me again. I regret nothing. Revenge is best served hot. Okay, I have 2 older brothers. Eldest is a good person. The middle is a monster. He is a meth-addled felon. He has tortured my family for 20 years and I have taken the brunt of the assault as the only person willing to openly challenge him. He stole my mother's wedding rings, my grandmother's car, and my TV, to name a few things. My family has decided to try again to welcome him back into their lives, so I followed suit. It is Christmas 2013 minus best holiday celebrations I could never imagine. All is well. Middle brother walks in the door to collect presents 2 days after celebrations. Strike 1. Middle brother drops bag of drugs when he walks in the door. Strike 2. Middle brother criticizes eldest brother's renovations and tells my grandmother she wasted her money. Strike 3. In the car on the way home, decided it's best to go back into town together so it saves someone a trip. Middle brother asks me for my passport. I say no, I cannot do that. Middle brother concocts magical story where I have borrowed his ID to get into clubs when I was a teenager. Lies. I did not and would not. He says he needs it to get into a party. He is 300 pounds and 35 and would never be carded under any circumstances. Middle brother differs to his standard method of persuasion and starts yelling and is getting increasingly loud and argumentative. I tell him that it is illegal and that it would be very bad for him if he gets caught. There is a line somewhere between asking and demanding something of someone. He crosses it. My heart races like it used to when I was a boy. When he used to follow my friends and I and beat the shit out of us with his friends. I remember him pulling me out of a lake where I almost drowned, but it is not him anymore. The brother I knew is gone and there is a total stranger directly behind me demanding the symbol of my liberty. Strike ducking 4. I tell him that if he mentions my passport again on the ride home, I will crane the steering wheel into a snowbank and beat him to within an inch of his life. I hear "Give me your passport" in the voice of a man I do not know, from a face I do not recognize. Blood and adrenaline surge from my heart faster and more rapidly than I have ever felt. We pull into a parking lot. I open my door and wait patiently until the ducking asshole works up the courage to fight me. He steps out and yells something I do not hear. I tell him that I will give him one more chance to get back in the car without saying a word about my passport ever again. He says passport with a wily grin and expects me to be the same cowering boy that I used to be, the same kid who loved him and adored him and wanted nothing else but to be just like him. I connect the quickest and hardest fist I have ever thrown against another person directly onto his chin. Blood spurts out of his mouth with the second blow. He hits me twice above and below my right eye. I completely lose my shit and wail on the left side of his face until it is a broken and bloody ruin. If you are reading this, middle brother duck you, edit you bet your ass I felt no guilt. When I was a kid, probably 4 or 5 years old, I was watching Dumbo with my neighbor. The elephants on parade part was scary as all hell to me back then, and I peed my pants. My neighbor told everyone in my pre-K class and would not stop calling me the pants peer for weeks. Finally, one day I slept over at her house and took a pair of her pants out her closet, put them on, and peed in them. I woke her up to show her, and that is the story of how I became the 2-time pants peer. Too long didn't he read got revenge on a girl by putting her pants on and peeing in them. I was living in a Middle Eastern country a few years back. Nice place, but because 50% of the population in the region is under the age of 20, the roads are simply overrun by teenage and early 20s douchebags. The culture-ass fatalism makes young guys even more reckless and irresponsible than they are already programmed to be by their hormones. So, after a rare rain shower, the highway is flooded up ahead, 18 inches deep. Traffic is backed up for at least a mile, and it takes us 15 minutes to get to the flooded patch. Everyone is pissed. Then I see 2 cars full of teenage douchebags passing people on the shoulder on the right from way behind me. Mother ducker, there is just no excuse for that horse shit. Eventually they get to where I am, and they pass me just as we are reaching the 50-yard stretch where the flooding is crossing the road. And would not you know it, one of them crosses into the far left lane, and one stays in the right lane to avoid the deep water in the middle lane. And would not you know it, their windows are rolled down. I am in a Toyota Land Cruiser, nice big 4WD, so while they are crawling through a foot of water in their little Action Boy Hondas, I decide duck it and gun it between them through the deep stuff in the middle lane. The wave from my front wheels was about 6 feet high, and it had to have put 20 gallons of water through the windows of both cars, completely ducking, drenched, all of them, with nasty urban stormwater runoff. Of course they chased up after me once they cleared the water, screaming and cursing, but I just pretended to be on my phone and ignored them. Eventually they gave up and I figured I had just been as impatient and selfish as them and had hosed them by accident. Most satisfying revenge of my life. Years ago, living in an apartment in Johannesburg, the block consisted mostly of elderly folk and a few young working couples like me and my wife, who generally hit the sack early. The place was like a morgue after 10 p.m., until a couple of guys moved into the place below us. Party types, who would whoop it up till dawn. If anyone complained, they did quickly get threatening. The owner of the apartment was one of the guys' dad, so they had no fear of being kicked out. One evening, around midnight, They hooked up with some mates' girls to go clubbing. They were outside in the road, talking, yelling, girls screeching, bedlam. Eventually they depart. I was furious, but being an original 90-pound wimp, felt helpless. Then I remembered the tube of super glue in my desk drawer. I went to their flat, which had a serious security gate protecting the front door. I put the glue nozzle into the gate lock, a heavy-duty bolt lock, and squeezed the sucker dry. Couple of hours later, lying in bed, I hear the party hardies arrive back. Same deal as when they left, making a hell of a commotion as they spill out their cars and head for the apartment. Then silence. Later I heard they ended up breaking a toilet window and getting in that way. The girlfriends of course were having none of it, so they buggered off, as did the mates. The next day they had to get in locksmith, who used a blowtorch to cut the lock out of its steel casing. This damaged the door behind, so both gate and door had to be replaced, along with the bathroom window. Because these boneheads did not have the money for all this, the dad who owned the apartment had to cough. He was so pissed off that he kicked out the roommate. From then on, it was the quietest flat in the building. Not me but my mom. When I was 9, I am 26 now. My parents went through a really rough divorce. Long story short, my dad had a very public and long-term affair with a prominent public figure in our area. We will call her Debbie. Naturally, my mother was humiliated, but back then she was quite meek, unassuming, and not at all vindictive. She only did one thing to the woman that broke up my family. My mom is a nurse, and about 6 months after the divorce she was attending a medical conference our area. As she walks in the room, she saw that one of the panelists was the woman who slept with her husband. Shocked, but always in control, my mother calmly walked to the very front of the room and sat down silently in front of Debbie. Now, Debbie had been a family friend for over a decade, so my mom was intimately familiar with her upbringing and unfortunate issues. Remembering that she was an English Lit major in undergrad, my mom took out a red Sharpie and drew a very large A link on the notebook that she brought to the conference. She turned it around and faced it directly at Debbie, never saying a word. Debbie was visibly agitated, and when it came time for her to speak, something amazing happened. She started ticking. You see, my mother also knew that Debbie had a condition that when under immense stress, despite significant speech therapy and experience in public speaking, she began to twitch and stutter. She twitched so much it impaired her speech, and she had to rush her portion. When she ended, my mother calmly shut her notebook, smiled at the woman, and walked out of the room. She never spoke a word. That was the last they saw of each other. Too long didn't he read it. My mom is a badass. This is not that great, but I worked as a contractor helping IT set up hardware for a branch of hospitals. Almost everyone was easy to get along with, but one of the contractors treated me like I was an idiot because I was the only one there without any formal IT training. It was a daily explanation of something very simple that I already understood. Okay, C-dubs too. You know how to put a USB in, right? Laughs, right? Well, okay, but just in case you forgot, let me show you. Dude, we did not have time for this ego trip bullshit. I just kept my mouth shut and worked my ass off for the length of the contract. A few months later, I was rehired by the same IT team. They wanted me to go through the previous contractors we had that summer and pick out which ones to help out with our project. Guess who did not get hired? When I used to be a cheerleader, we were organizing a trip to Florida from the UK to do some training and to have an awesome holiday. I took charge of organizing the flights, and asked everyone if they were okay paying me back if I bought all the flights together. Yeah, I know, bad idea. Anyway, needless to say, one girl changed her mind about going because she was starting a new job. And just before we were due to go, I got a handwritten note in the post from her mother. We were in our 20s, saying that she never agreed to me booking a flight on her behalf and that she was not liable to pay me because she had decided not to go. I was in a bit of a panic because I did not have her home address, and she just ignored all my calls and emails. I wanted to take her to court, but to do that you have to have their address in order to serve the papers. After spending ages trying to ask around if people knew her address, and even trying to get her friends to give it to me without success, I stayed up all night figuring out a way to figure out where she lived. It literally took me all night, but I managed to hack into her Hotmail account and then her PayPal account, which lead me to her home address. I could have just taken the money from her account, but I did want to do this as by the book as possible. She turned up in court accompanied by her mother, and they tried to use Facebook photos to prove that I had used her ticket to take someone else in her place. I came armed with a printout of the airline terms which clearly stated that the tickets were non-transferable. Judgment was swift, victory was mine. I am a professor. Many years ago, I had a small cluster of students in one course that I strongly suspected were cheating. Scattered evidence suggested that they had knowledge of my test content ahead of time. I do not let my students keep their test copies, and I rewrite my tests every semester. So this was puzzling. I determined that the most likely way they were cheating was during the photocopying process, so I set out to test that possibility first. When the next test in the course was getting close, I left the previous semester's version of the test in the photocopy room as bait. I then rewrote the new version of the test, keeping page 1 the same to avoid raising suspicions on test day but otherwise completely revising the questions. I made the new copies on another department's copier the morning of the test. Sure enough, when I graded the test I found that my cheaters all had perfect scores on the page 1 questions, but then bombed all subsequent questions to varying degrees. They all went from AS on the first 2 tests to DS and FS on the test in question. Those patterns alone probably would not be enough evidence for an airtight academic integrity charge, but one of them gave up the whole group and the plan when I called her in to confront her with the test copies. Turns out they had access to my department test copy room from a former student worker and would routinely pop in and steal exams in the to-be-copied pile after hours. In the end, it caused a big disciplinary fuss in the administration with F grades, multiple suspensions, and 1 expulsion, which is a true rarity given how gun-shy universities are about kicking out students. The cheaters were hoisted by their own petard and I got what passes for professionally street cred among my peers for catching a well-organized group that many others had missed. Too long didn't he read caught academic cheaters in college with the right bait. Justice was served. My first real boyfriend, we kissed instead of just holding hands, kissed another girl and dumped me for her when I was a freshman in high school. She had actively pursued him although she knew he had a girlfriend, so I blamed her rather than him. I know. Fast forward 4 years, I was a volleyball player throughout college. In the off-season I played in a city women's league and a co-ed league as an outside hitter. My team played a new team with a familiar face. She did not recognize me, different high schools, but I immediately recognized her. My team's setter kept giving me amazing sets and I kept slamming the ball over the net, just waiting for my shot. Finally, she was in the back row and my setter set me up. I hit the ball and the boyfriend stealer stepped into the hit. It bounced off her foot and went straight up into her face and broke her nose. This is more petty revenge, but yeah. A few years back, my 15-year-old cousin was staying over at my place, which I shared with my boyfriend at the time. Her parents were on vacation in Cuba for a few weeks. While she was with us, we had to make all of her food. She could not cook and waited for me or my boyfriend to come home, otherwise she would only eat chips or popcorn. She would not even make a sandwich. One day, she updated her Facebook status, which was a whiny complaint about how bored she was. She had free reign to go out and how weird I was. I guess she forgot I have her on Facebook. It really pissed me off since I made all of her meals and tried my best to keep her company. That night, when I was making her a turkey sandwich, I took my revenge. I used the end slices of the bread loaf to build the sandwich and the bitter white part of a romaine lettuce leaf. I also put too much mayo on it. She ate that sandwich, and she had a look of annoyance on her face, but there was nothing she could do. Bitch. An old post of mine, I used to go to a public high school where the majority of students were low to middle class Italian origin kids of immigrants, 90%. Tough going to say the least. When I was in high school I used to get bullied by a guy called Ronaldo. We had a few scraps, either verbally or fisticuffs over the years. I was always the type of guy who wouldn't take other people's shit, and while others balked at giving me a hard time, particularly when I went through puberty and became one of the tallest largest guys in school, he somehow always managed to give me a hard time. It was a tough time, but in a way, I paid my dues early and learned from a stern father that if people punched you, you punch back and you punch harder and you will know if they are men or not. As luck would have me, Ronaldo ended up in the same college I went to, and he always managed to somehow, someway be a little shit to me. What made things worse is that we fell for the same girl, Andrea, who eventually became my girlfriend of over 4 years. Everyone knew he had feelings for her and that it killed him she was with me and not him. He always tried to seduce her with random calls and emails, being the son of a wealthy father who owned his own construction company, that he had nice cars, lots of money, a bunch of shit that I didn't have, and over the years worked hard to earn, coming from a low-income family that was having problems making ends meet. He was a constant issue the first year of my relationship, and we had several conflicts. Years later, after college and shortly after I broke up with Andrea, I received an email from him out of the blue. I never corresponded with him. Facebook didn't exist back then, and he went out and told me in an epic letter which went far too long, swore at me in excess and used terrible English. No wonder he never finished college and dropped out to work with daddy. Basically it was a no one liked me in college and to F off. I haven't seen him in well over 2 years, nor did we have any real friends in common. As a way of keeping my cool, nor did I want him to have the satisfaction to get me mad, I never responded to his emails. He sent several. However, I could not let his taunting go without consequences, so I went online and googled his name. After searching around a bit, I easily found a complete profile of him regarding his career, where he worked and what type of work it was. His father passed away recently and he now owned his father's business and had a team of employees working for him. I spied a bit more and hung on to the address of his place of employment for several weeks while I plotted. One day, I proceeded to go into a local sex shop and I purchased the largest, fattest, floppiest black dildo that I could find along with some key, and I went home, wrote a special note for him and put it along with the big fat black dildo and key and boxed it in a standard box that couldn't be traced back to me, and sent it priority mail that required for him specifically to sign. The note read, "Since you have so much time to search out people that never gave a shit about you to begin with, I figured you had have enough time to go duck yourself with this." One of our mutual acquaintances dropped me an email a few days later. This acquaintance worked for Ronaldo during his internship, and apparently the package arrived while they were preparing to head out for a team lunch on a Friday, and he was very excited to get the box opened since Ronaldo thought it was something he ordered online that he was expecting and would make it a good weekend. And he opened it in front of a number of CO workers, and instead of whatever he ordered, he pulls out a giant black floppy dildo. Priceless. I have done this multiple times, but here is the most recent story. So I was coming back from this road trip with a few friends, and holy shit, there was a pretty lights show on the way home. So I immediately buy the cheapest tickets available, which came in a package of 4. It cost $44 each ticket, but the face value was $55. Anyways, 2 of them went to my friends, and with no time to lose, the show was starting in 2 hours. I posted an ad on Craigslist asking for $60 for it. Was not long before I got a message. The guy sent me a text and agreed to meet me in front of the venue in order to pay for the ticket. When we met, it was kind of my fault because I did not check, but he shorted me $20. I was furious. What kind of cunt rips off somebody who hooks you up with a last-minute front row ticket, right? So, I have his phone number. For every holiday I wait, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, I like to think he is having a good time, hanging out with his buddies or family. It is then that I post an ad on Craigslist in highly populated cities: San Francisco, New York, Detroit, etc. Casual encounters M4M that says something like, "By curious twink looking to suck first cock." I put a convincing message in that ends with "Send your cock pics to 12345678890 and I will pick the sexiest one." I wait a day, and take it down, for I am merciful. TLDR guy ripped me off. I make sure that every holiday he is sent hundreds of dick pictures. About a month ago I found out my CO worker, a good friend of mine, was cheating with my GF at the time. Teamed up with few other work buddies and decided to teach him a lesson. We went to a Korean mart and bought 2 frozen raw fishes. With the help of one of my buddies I was able to get hold of his car keys, so we hid one of those 2 fish we bought earlier in a place which would be pretty obvious and easy to notice, and we duct taped the other fish underneath his passenger side seat. He did find one of the fish and was pretty mad with us. Here's the sweet revenge though. He kept complaining that he just couldn't get rid of the fish smell from his car even though he cleaned his car with shampoo and has used all kinds of car scent. I quit that work a few days after, so I don't know if he found the other fish yet. We don't talk anymore. Driving home around 2 in the morning, 2 cars ahead of me, one is clearly giving the other car a hard time, tailgating him, cutting him off. Windows open and he is yelling "Tame other guy." I catch up at the light and see a scared older man 70 plus getting verbally cussed out by this kid. Now, I am totally sober and I know that cops hang out in the back of the parking lot at work. Hey, they were security guards on their off hours. I get he punks attention and he starts harassing me. 1 mile to go, cussing at me, trying to cut me off. I pull into the parking lot, he follows, with down to the back and yep, there is the cop. Lights come on, both of us get pulled over. Other guy is screaming and I only have to explain for 30 seconds what happened. I leave the scene like I did my good deed for the day. TL doctor saved old man from being harassed. Cops pull over and arrest the right guy. For 10 months I had the worst roommate ever, a 40-year-old guy who acted like he was 21. His parents support him and pay for his condo, which I rented a room in with no lease. As such, I had no tenant rights which he took advantage of. He was loud, drunk, drugged out, and yelling racial obscenities at the TV daily. He was constantly forcing me to listen to his rants about things he had no real knowledge about. This guy was the most spoiled, entitled, inconsiderate, narcissistic person I have ever met. The day I was supposed to move out he was past the duck out from a days-long alcohol and drug binge. I moved all of my stuff into the truck and was driving off when it hit me. There was a possum carcass on the side of the road near the condo. I went back up, grabbed his BBQ tongs and a bag, and picked up the carcass. I walked back up again, went in, opened the door to his room, and whipped that carcass onto his bed, then waked out of that place for the last time. He never even stirred as the dead possum, rotting and baked by the sun, landed next to him with a sickening plop. He deserves worse, actually, but I did what I could. In high school one of my best friends started dating my ex-boyfriend the day after we broke up, which happened to be my 16th birthday. So then and there I decided to ruin her sweet 16. I just was not sure how. Fast forward 3 months, she planned an extravagant birthday party and played hooky from school the Friday before the big party to prepare. This was my opportunity. I told everyone at school that she had gotten the flu and was postponing the party, hence why she was not in school. We were neighbors so everyone bought it. The next day she got all dolled up, arrived at her sweet 16 party, in a large rented ballroom only to spend the entire party with her mom and little sister. Not one person showed up. Looking back it was terrible and mean, but to a 16-year-old girl I felt she broke sacred girl code, and that is never okay. Too long didn't he read a birthday for a birthday leaves the whole world sad. Edit great. My highest comment is about me being a total bitch. This is not as clever or conniving as some on here, but it still ranks as the #1 top spot for my best revenge moment. I was 13 and was reclining on a beach chair. This boy about my age and his younger friend, who I did known for about a week, were standing behind me and kept messing with the chair and would not stop when I asked them to. Him and his friend were classic little bratty, redneck children. The younger one had a rat tail mullet, relevant for later, and the entire time I did known them they were spouting off about how the boys were doing this but the girls could not do that because they were girls. Stuff like that. The last time they messed with my chair I stood up, spun around and looked the bigger one dead in the eye and told him he had better stop. He looked right at me with a smirk on his face and asked, "What are you going to do about it?" As soon as the words left his mouth I punched him dead in the eye and grabbed the younger kid's rat tail mullet and yanked it so hard he fell to the ground. Then I sat back down. Both started crying almost immediately and did not mess with me again. 8 years later and it is still the best feeling of revenge I have ever had. hit like. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to our channel.